Okay, since I'm doing a spring under, it's going to drop the entire axle about 4 inches. So since the axle's on top, it's going to need more room to come up, and it'll basically make contact with the frame. So used to have a frame bump stop right here. I removed that. I'm going to notch, and if you take a look over there, nice half circle cut in the frame. I'm going to notch the frame to allow about 2¼ inch more up travel in without contacting the frame. That's going to, of course, weaken the frame. So what you got to do is you've got to box the frame, and you make a template out of some cardboard. That'll get you maybe my box piece. That'll also be curved to match that curve, and that'll get me back to the same amount of metal that was there before I cut it out. In fact, it'll probably be a little bit stronger at that point than the rest of the frame since that's boxed. And I'm going to take some, happens to be what I just had laying around, so it's 3/16, a little thicker than you need, 3/16 by 6 plate, and I'll use my template to cut out my my boxing plate. I may, if I have some thinner metal, actually use some thinner metal and not use this 3/16, but I happen to just have, no, I just used some, I had some 4.5 inch 120 wall pipe from another project, and since it's 4.5, gives me about 2¼ on the inside. The axle is about 3, so it basically will completely clear all the way down to there. So that'll allow that axle to kind of tuck up almost 3.5 inches from where it would have been able to tuck up, and that should give me enough up travel without bobbing out. I'm going to still install some bump stops, so if it does come up too high, it'll hit the bump stops anyway before it contacts the frame. But that should do the trick. And to figure out where center is, it's really important, because you can't just assume. You notice here, if I would have just gone and assumed, this would have been the center about 3/8 of an inch further toward the rear. But this bump stop was the factory bump stop. If I would have just assumed center from that, I would have been good. But it's best to remove, what I did is I removed all the rest of the leaves from the leaf pack, so I just have one solid upper leaf spring to basically allow me to articulate the axle and have it go up and down without putting a lot of pressure on it. So I just brought the axle all the way up to the frame, and then figured out where that would be. In this case, once I get them both up, I centered that and figured out the center of the axle is basically right there. Now granted, if it's off 1/4 of an inch, it's really not going to matter. In fact, if you even use a little bit bigger pipe, it won't matter at all, because you'll have plenty of room for it to kind of tuck up in there. But since I was a little close, and I'm a little bit particular, I wanted to make sure I kind of had it lined up right. I had the right size hole saw laying around too, from the same project that I used for that other pipe. So you can, you're limited on what size hole saws you can get. So if you want a nice clean hole, try to find out what hole saw you can get, and maybe get the size pipe that has an outside diameter similar, and then you won't worry. Word of caution, these giant hole saws go slow and easy, and not a lot of pressure. Just let it slowly almost file through it rather than cut a lot of metal, because when it grabs with that many teeth, you'll be getting a wrist splint, depending on what kind of drill you're using. So be careful there. Also, the slower you go, it cuts like a saw, so you don't dull it. You can use this 100 times if you just go slow. If you go high speed with it, it'll start to get too hot, dull the blade, and you might get one cut out of it, and you'll get really frustrated, and they're not cheap. So go slow like a saw rather than like a drill. Take your time. And what I did is I used the saw to cut through this, and then I just used a cutoff disc to finish cutting that piece off. cut off disc like that. Just a simple, about a 16-inch. I like the thinner stuff, even though it goes for more cutoff disc. It cuts a cleaner line, and you just run that right through. Cuts that steel like butter. That's it. So now I think I'm gonna get started working on the other side. Get the rivets drilled out, get it prepped. Also, if you notice, I didn't know how much this thing would flex once I got that metal out of the way, so I put another piece of steel head laying around. Just clamped it at each end to kind of keep it from doing any major flexing after I do it. That way when I tack in my replacement tube, I'll be able to probably pull that off, because it really shouldn't, once I put that in there, it should tie it all back together where it really shouldn't be flexing anymore. And then once I weld in the box plate on the back, it'll be ready to handle some weight. That's about it. Key is articulate the axle. If you're going with leaf springs, I'm staying with leaf springs. If you're not going with leaf springs, obviously you've got to have your whole four-link set up in place so you can cycle the axle up to where on the frame you're going to need a notch. You don't want to notch the frame and find out it's in the wrong spot. So that's about it. That ought to look okay. Should be leaving enough meat. Since we're going to use it as a pickup, I'm hoping it ends up being just as strong. Yep, you can see, but I got the tubes welded, and what I did is I masked off any of the edges where I'm going to be welding in my my frame stiffener. And when I pull the tape off, I won't have any paint. I'm going to come back through with some weld through primer, give it a quick blast. That way the inside will be completely rust free, painted, and I won't have to worry about it anymore, because once I weld it, it'll be hard to get some paint in there. So I put some nice thick layers of rust preventative paint, and letting it dry up, pull the tape off, and then I'll put the plates in, get those welded in, and then finish painting the whole back half of this frame, and finish bolting in the gas tank. And there I've removed the tape, gave it a quick dusting of some weld-through primer, and of course make sure you use weld-through primer from either a paint store or welding supply store. That's a rust prohibitive layer, so whatever doesn't burn off will protect the bare metal, and I want it to get back inside there and paint. So same thing over here. Granted, got a little overspray on the inside of my black, but it doesn't really matter because who's going to see it. Also did a coat of black on the inside. I taped off the edges where there would be any welding. Did a coat of the nice rust preventative black paint. This is going to be on the inside where I won't be able to see later. And I came back over it and sprayed the edges with rust weld through primer. So the inside should be completely rust free for years. As soon as this all dries, I'll be able to weld this thing in. It's already a little burned in. So there it goes. Template. Took the template to Rock and Road Performance. They used it, scanned it, burned my 2 plates, which would have taken me hours to cut myself. This is a relief so that my bed bolt, I'll be able to get to my bed bolt when I'm ready to bolt the bed in. All I did here is I bead welded all the way around, and then I just ground it with a flap disc to make it smooth, so that on both sides it just has kind of a nice factory smooth finish. I left the other welds fine. Now I'm going to finish cleaning up some of the loose rust and paint the rest of this frame, and then I can start working on the cab. There used to be a cross member. These 2 holes are. They used to go all the way across, and what that was for is supporting the rear spring perch on the rear frame to keep the frame from twisting. So what I'm doing, since the gas tank's going up there, I'm replacing it with a 1x2 120 wall piece across the top. That'll keep the top from twisting in. And my gas tank frame that I made for the frame It's a frame that goes all the way around the gas tank. When it bolts up, it'll hold the bottom from going either way. So I'm going to weld this thing in right now. I'm almost got everything in where I can got it all cleaned up, and I'm going to give it a coat of some paint here as soon as I get this welded in. Fully painted. I might do satin, but all they had was high gloss. It was okay. Pretty much going to be ready for rear springs, mounting the gas tank, plumbing the gas tank, and next step is laying the wiring harness out actually from the motor and starting to get the cab cleaned up. I think I get the cab on before it's 100 degrees. Looks okay. Rear gas tank will go back here and coming out pretty good, hopefully.